I'm Edward Warfield. I'm the publisher of City Biz, and I'm honored today to interview John Ackerly, the CEO of Virtru. Welcome, John.
So my pleasure to then be here today, Edwin.
Can you provide an introduction to Virtru, your sort of core products, some of your clients, the number of employees, and the other key sort of metrics?
Yep, for sure. So then Virtru is a data security company that my brother Will Ackerly and I founded almost a decade ago. Will having been at the National Security Agency, and then I was part of the National Economic Council, and then in the White House on September 11th. So I bring the policy background. Will brings the technical expertise. We have 7,300 customers today, ranging from then Verizon to to then crypto companies like Circle, Algorand, Coinbase, to then global corporations like Airbus. Really, it's all about how do you make it easy to protect data anywhere that you share it. There's been a lot of talk and I think a lot of noise. So then around this concept called zero trust, and frankly a lot of hype, but there's a lot of goodness in terms of that concept where in a cloud first world there is no more perimeter to protect your sensitive stuff. What is important? It's your data. So apply protections to the data itself, and that's what Virtru does. We make it really easy for companies to begin their zero trust. So then a journey by protecting emails, files, data within SaaS applications, etc. So very happy for this conversation today. We're also based out of Washington D.C., and so very proud of our DMV roots here.
And so let's go back to 2012 when your brother, you and Will started. Can you tell us about the actual founding and the connection you with the policy advisor at the White House? Were there any insights? Yeah, were there any insights that you garnered at that time that led to the foundation of Virtru?
Yes, absolutely. So then a great question, and so then I would say, we started Virtru not to do a startup or kind of get into the kind of entrepreneurial game, but to we saw a massive societal challenge and a massive challenge from a security perspective from our experiences. So when I was in the West Wing, I saw firsthand the massive challenge when you had data and information that was really stuck in silos that could not be shared even within our own government, because there was a lack of trust that data, once it's shared, would be out of that, so then organizations control. And frankly, within the White House, to then coordinate, we had to take paper documents that had red dots on them and pass them from the department to department for physical signatures. Thank goodness we now have DocuSign to then solve that problem. We really saw a challenge. I saw within so then the White House that massive mission challenge of data not being shared because of a lack of trust. Will saw it firsthand as well in terms of his work when he was forward deployed in Iraq. And he would be the first person to then say he is not a great athlete, but my brother running from a secure skiff with a USB drive into a Chinook helicopter, pretty poor mission execution, also really bad security to have a few bunch of to then have a whole bunch of USB sticks that have top secret data on them, kind of so then floating around. And so he came up with a technology to make it really easy to effectively bind encryption to data objects, any kind of data, and really enforce policy. But the magic being, how do you make that seamless to then support any kind of data? When he developed that technology back in 2008, it was at our parents' Thanksgiving. So the kitchen table, so the event when he was talking about this whole notion. At the time, he called it the Black Cloud, which is terrible branding, but but the underlying trusted sharing format that is now called the trusted data format, and is the common standard that has been adopted by ODNI. After that meeting, or that informal meeting around the kitchen table, we spent 2 years. So then at that point, I was in private equity up in New York. But man, what is the business model? Can we prove that we can integrate into tools that matter? to people and to companies, and to really scale this kind of end-to-end encryption approach. There have been so many attempts at this over the past decades. The internet is a fundamentally insecure protocol. Email, which is where we started, also a fundamentally insecure protocol. But as soon as we kind of proved that out, Will and a couple of his colleagues at the fort, we thought, you know what, let's go give this a shot. And so we started the business actually out of, literally, it is one of those garage stories, but it was a garage in a recently deceased, so then a grandmother's basement of our first engineer. Kind of got the thing rolling, bootstrapped it ourselves for the first couple years, and that's how we got going. And it's always been a real differentiation. And I would say for any entrepreneur and for all the CEOs listening, you know it always takes 5 times as long. It is 3 times as expensive. But what gets you through it and to the place where we are today is a real focus on mission, and making sure that you're recruiting the best and brightest who really care about that mission, not just the bottom line. Really, from a reciprocal perspective, if you're creating value, then you can receive value. But it's always about creating that value first for your customers.
Great. Can you provide an overview of the data production products that is presently in Virtru's portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about Virtru, so then simply put, it is a set of capabilities. It's a platform that enable either a developer or an end user to then protect data, apply policy to data, and to then share that data. So we have shrink wrap products that seamlessly integrate into Google Workspace, into Office 365, that to protect email and then file sharing workflows. We also have an independent kind of platform agnostic file sharing product called then Secure Share. And then over the past year, and you're really supported by our growth equity financing, have been accelerating direct integrations, Virtru shrink wrapped capabilities into SaaS applications like Salesforce, Zendesk, Atlassian. And so basically, if you are a company and you want the easy button, just take our direct integrations into your most important SaaS applications. And then if you have other custom applications that may require really the direct engagement of a developer, we also provide that, because we can't, as a single company, do the integrations across every SaaS application, but we definitely have easy to use SDKs so that you can yourself, at a customer like Equifax, they are supporting dozens and dozens of then custom data workflows with our products. And so, that's our basic suite. Also, we have a division that focuses on the national security industry, both at home and with our coalition partners. And so in that context, we also support sensor data protection, IoT. Really think just like an email body or a file, a payload coming off of a sensor. It's the same thing. It's just data, and just making that highly performant so that you can do that kind of end-to-end protection in the very bandwidth, so the constrained environments where you want to push more of that compute to the edge. So that is that kind of simple synopsis. Baseline platform. We have our own products, and then you can also take our SDKs and do your own integrations as well.
And you're also an encryption provider for Google Workspace. So tell us about that partnership with Google.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first move out of the gate to really make an impact, it was, okay, what are the products that are the most globally distributed and have the highest number of users? One of those is obviously Gmail. And so we started by essentially hacking Gmail so that we could insert end-to-end security into that interface, so it'd be really, really easy for the end user, whether it was a desktop user or someone using mobile. And so we got that started. Google wasn't that happy about it to begin. This was back in 2012, 2013. They had a different monetization model at that point. But as they started to really focus on moving upmarket into that enterprise customers, they saw us as a critical partner. in terms of a lot of compliance use cases, whether it's ITAR data, CMMC, HIPAA data, CGIS data. There's a whole kind of laundry list of important compliance regimes, and that, I think, given my policy background and just the fundamental technology, it seemed like a natural partnership to like really focus on those verticals where that additional security within Google, but importantly, data shared externally from Google into Microsoft into then other, so then ecosystems was super easy, and very, very secure, where you don't have to trust Google to kind of do the right things with your data and with the encryption key. So very grateful for the partnership at this point. We were their first recommended partner for data protection and encryption. We have over 4,000 joint customers together, so that's a very important partnership, and they've been really executing extremely well on that. So then, really that the journey to be a top player in cloud, and very glad to be part of that.
And some of your other clients include the state of Maryland and Brown University. Do you want to give us an overview of some of your other clients?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there are, we have about 10 million individual, so then users, very proud, and, of the fact that our first customers were then psychiatrists, teachers within schools. Really, it was all about how do I communicate very sensitive data securely in an easy way, and we continue to have that small business layer, and we have 1,000 or so doctors' offices, dental practices, and we will always support that part of the ecosystem. One of the big moves over the past decade was, okay, how do you support 100,000 users at a large organization as well? A lot goes into that. You have to support a security operations center. You have to support e-discovery. You have to enable encrypted search. You have to federate identity into many systems, and also integrate with existing investments. So, when you talk about Equifax and Verizon and these other large institutions, those ones are very exciting as well, because it can start with an email, so then integration, and then evolve into file sharing and custom applications. So we support Fortune 50 companies as well as small businesses, and we support customers all over the world. And really, it's been ease of use, ease of deployment, and sort of a natural way to begin on what is now known. And we've been talking about zero trust for then years and years, but a way to get started on that journey. And so those are some of our customers. We have, I think I mentioned it. It feels like almost every crypto business of any scale uses Virtru to protect their own information, and I think that's a testament to sort of the quality and the innovation that we bring to bear when it comes to protecting sensitive content.
So you're facing your first decade in business. Can you share some of the key milestones since launching in 2012?
Yeah, well, I think it was. So I mean, so many along the way. I think our first customer was a customer named Dr. Smiles. That was like in 2013, and we have some funny photographs from our first conference, which was a dental conference. To what we're doing today in terms of enabling mission partners to then really share vital information, um, uh, with regards to what's happening overseas right now, as well as NGOs. So I think what that was a key milestone. You can look at funding milestones as well. I think our growth equity round with Tiger, Iconic, Bessemer, the Chertoff Group, Foundry Capital. That was an important milestone where we are thoughtfully investing that to continue to broaden our product portfolio. Um, Getting our a few years ago, 1 million monthly active users was a milestone. So there are a bunch of milestones along the way, but it is never a straight line, particularly when you're tackling such a pernicious challenge, which is protecting data. There's a lot of reasons why companies protect data by proxy, whether it's firewalls or even within zero trust network access. all those things are important, but there's been so much capital poured into those kinds of solutions when actually the like load bearing pillars got to be protecting what matters and actually applying policy to data. It's just, you know, um, a very difficult thing to solve technically, and super grateful that we're now to a point where we have done so.
And so, what are the growth opportunities for Virtru? And are you planning a Series C? Or is your growth going to be internal, or do you see some acquisitions that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So, I mean, Series A, B, C, like I don't know what those letters actually mean. I think our last round was a Series C, but it's sort of, I think, um, given we have 90% gross margins plus, so I don't foresee that we will need to raise additional capital. But with the existing capital, there are some really important growth levers. One is by design we went commercial first in our early days, just given our government background. We wanted to make sure that we were off the shelf technology. But now going back into the national security sphere, there is such an appreciation for zero trust data, and that the TDF, so the trusted data format, which is what my brother invented, is now where where those critical organizations are now aligning. There's got to be a common open standard for how to protect data. Really investing behind our Department of Defense intelligence community business is a massive growth vector for us. Related to that is in 2 weeks, we'll be open sourcing the core components of how to make TDF useful. And so, putting in a plug, if there are early adopters who want to see the code, definitely let me know, and we can point you to the repository. But open source is obviously a really important move for us. TDF's always been an open standard, but to build a real community around TDF is just also a important antidote to what is typically kind of proprietary approaches, very rigid approaches to how to protect data. And then obviously always continuing to invest in our Google partnership, in our partnerships to make email, DLP, file sharing super seamless. That's going to be an ongoing investment for us. And then finally, globally, given data sovereignty issues and the fact that we are running key servers all over the world, being a way to really combat the wrong approach to how to solve a data sovereignty, which is a bunch of micro internets, but really having the locus of control be around the encryption keys, which is what matters. That is the final growth pillar. So there's a ton of opportunity within Virtru, and I think very grateful that we never saw any great resignation. We continue to recruit the best and brightest, and I think it's because there was a confluence of the economic opportunity with no BS massive societal mission that we have been addressing, but are trying to attract really like-minded developers and companies to kind of take the same approach.
Last year, you wrote a blog entitled Restoring Public Trust When We Need It Most. Can you explain your vision for digital vaccine credentials, and has it garnered any traction?
Yeah, look, I I would say that was a big disappointment. Frankly, it's early on in the pandemic, I think you saw the cost associated with decades of the erosion of trust in public institutions, as well as some of the large hyperscalers that you know often repurpose data for purposes that were not the intent of the data owner, right? And so, what did you see? You saw a rejection of the digital vaccine passport. Contact tracing never got off the ground. The approach to actually solving that is you really have to start from a policy perspective with a set of principles of that at the top it's your data is yours, and any system needs to apply the kinds of controls so that the individual always has that big red revoke button, so that the data can be used for its intended purpose, but only for that purpose for that period of time. That was never implemented, and frankly, if you look at the Walgreens hack and other breaches, there was a reason why the public should be concerned, because actually a lot of that data was in fact leaked. And so that was a big disappointment. My point in that article, and we spoke about it a lot, is there is a need for the confluence of policy and technology. And the policy really did not come together, and there was a lot of internal stuff within the Trump administration, which is not worth getting into. But a lot of competition for sort of who had control over what. It was very hard for us to engage. We tried, not successful. Where the same approach has really been successful, and I think the encouraging news, and I'm nonpartisan, but it's what bringing in some of the A team, people like Chris Inglis, Jen Easterly, and 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 this real alignment around the architecture of zero trust and zero trust data, and the fact that the government, I think, is now very effectively leading, and starting with data and data control, and seeing the work coming out of DoD is super encouraging. So it is not all doom and gloom, but when it came to the pandemic response, I give us an F, frankly.
So let's talk about the global situation. Last week, Tom Friedman wrote an article about the impact of social media on this war, and I was wondering if you could share any insights or thoughts on what's happening in terms of cybersecurity and Russia and Ukraine, without sharing any privileged content or.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Look, I'm going to try to stay in my swim lane. I've got all kinds of opinions, but I think they're kind of worth just the opinion of someone who reads a lot. I'd say the insights that I can give that are unclassified is one. Um, it's kind of awesome that we have not seen massive cyber attacks so far. And and look, we should not be in any way um, so then Pollyannish about it. But I think we're seeing, just like in football, the best defense is a good offense, and we are putting the Russians on their heels, and I love that. I think the other thing is, look, and we're spending a lot of time on this issue. There was a lot of trouble in Afghanistan and the coordination amongst allies there, because just like 20 years ago, it was very slow to be able to actually collaborate using any kind of digital assets, like literally physically having to get into a room and like sharing notebooks, which is crazy. And so based on what's happening now, you're seeing a lot of activity between NATO and the U.S. government, UK MOD. The Australians are getting involved to really come to a common framework for how to rapidly share information, even within a U.S. Central Command. Again, this is public, but 19 separate networks uh, uh, they had to manage for different um, groupings of allied partners, whether it was the Turks being in, if they were in, it was one network. If they were out, it was a totally separate network. If the Kuwaitis were in, it was yet another network. Super expensive, tough to manage, and so the U.S. government is in the process with their allies of fixing that, and that's a big positive. So I think there's a lot of good that is coming out of an absolutely horrific situation in terms of the West's ability to get aligned, and to do a much better job of them working together.
Well, thank you for sharing your insights on that. Is there any part of your story or the Virtru story or your brother's story that hasn't been told? Is there anything you want to share with us before we sign off?
Um, I would well, I think we still get along fabulously well, which I think being so that in business, so so then a decade with then any partner is a big deal, but like with your brother, I think it's particularly a big deal. And so I would just say, really grateful for the early believers and all the partners on this journey. We are in the second inning, I think, of really doing some really important work out there in the world. And just we are super mission focused, and we're going to continue to then be that way as we continue to then scale. So I, I would say that's it.
Well, John, I want to thank you for sharing your time and your story. It's a fascinating story, and we appreciate your commitment, your vision of America, and making sure that cybersecurity is properly managed. So again, thank you for your time.